Arthur's Family Truth. Carlton booked the meeting. By the time I sat down, my name was already printed on every page. Accounts, transfers, authorizations. I hadn't even opened the first page yet. Then I saw the note. Don't sign anything today. I didn't understand what it meant yet. But something about it didn't sit right. Not with those papers in front of me. That's when I realized this didn't start in that office. My name is Russell Pendleton. I'm 65 years old, retired CPA out of Portland, Oregon, 31 years with the same firm. Most of that time I spent doing forensic audits, the kind where you sit in a room full of boxes and figure out who's been moving numbers around where they shouldn't be. I was good at it, and it turns out that kind of training doesn't shut off just because you stop getting a paycheck. My wife Dorothy passed 2 years ago, ovarian cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the end. She handled it better than I ever could have. Dorothy had been a legal secretary for 22 years before she got sick. Sharp as they come, the kind of woman who read every line of every contract, even the ones that came with a new toaster. We'd been married 36 years. The house on Hawthorne was ours for 30 of them. After she was gone, it was just me rattling around in rooms that felt too big. Same kitchen, same backyard with the old maple tree, but the whole place just felt hollow. My son Carlton moved back in about 6 months after Dorothy died. He and his wife Vivian said they needed a place to regroup. Carlton's contracting business wasn't doing well, and they needed to get back on their feet, his words. I said, come on in. The house was too quiet, and I figured having family around would help us both. That was 18 months ago. For a while, it was fine. Vivian cooked dinner most nights. Carlton fixed the gutters, replaced a section of the back fence. It felt like a house again. I told myself this was what family looked like when it was working. Then things started to shift. Small things. Vivian asking questions about my accounts, my pension, how much the house was worth. Always casual, always with a smile. Carlton started paying more attention to where I went, and when I got home, his wife showed up in the doorway of my study twice in 1 week, once looking for tape, once looking for stamps, both of which she knew were in the kitchen drawer because they'd always been there. I noticed. I didn't say anything. Old habit from auditing, when something doesn't add up, you don't announce it. You watch. Then came the wealth firm. It was the first week of November. Carlton said he'd made an appointment for me at a place called Crestview Wealth Partners. He said it was a good idea to get a fresh start with my finances now that I was settled into retirement. He said the firm came recommended. He drove me there himself, which should have been the first red flag. Carlton hadn't driven me anywhere in 6 months. The office was in a commercial building on the west side. Clean lobby, expensive furniture, the kind of place that smells like leather and money. Carlton went into the back to set things up with someone, and I sat in the waiting area. That's when Nadine came over, mid-50s name tag on her blouse. She brought me a glass of water, and underneath it, pressed into my palm, a small folded note. She didn't make eye contact, just handed me the glass, turned around, and walked back to her desk. I unfolded it under the magazine on my lap. 5 words and a question, don't sign anything today. Ask who requested this. I read it twice, folded it, put it in my jacket pocket. A minute later, Carlton came back with a man in a gray suit, senior advisor. He started talking about asset restructuring, consolidating my power of attorney, streamlining my accounts for efficiency. He slid a stack of papers across the table. I looked at the papers. Then I looked at Carlton. He was watching me the way people watch you when they need you to do something and they don't want you to think about it too hard. I said I appreciated the thoroughness, but I'd like to take the materials home and review them first. Old accountant habit. Can't sign something I haven't read twice. Carlton's face tightened for just a second. Then he smiled and said, "Sure, take your time, Dad. I didn't take the papers." I stood up, thanked the advisor, and walked out through the side exit, called a cab from the sidewalk. Didn't wait for Carlton. On the ride home, I kept my hand in my jacket pocket, touching that note. 31 years of reading numbers that don't add up. This didn't add up. I had about 2 hours before Carlton and Vivian would get home, and I knew exactly where I needed to look. I went straight to the study. Dorothy's room, really. She used to bring files home from the law office and work at that desk until 10 at night sometimes. After she passed, I hadn't touched most of her things in there. Her reading glasses were still in the top drawer. Her coffee mug still on the shelf. I couldn't bring myself to move them. But that afternoon I wasn't there for memories. I opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, the one where Dorothy kept her personal documents, tax returns, insurance papers, the deed to the house. I flipped through all of it. Normal stuff, everything in order, the way she always kept things. Then, behind the last row of hanging folders, I found a manila envelope I'd never seen before. It was tucked flat against the back of the drawer, like someone had put it there on purpose, so it wouldn't be found by accident, on the front in Dorothy's handwriting. "Russell, open this if you need to." My hands were steady when I opened it. 31 years of auditing taught me that. But something in my chest wasn't. Inside, I found a draft of a trust document, a printed list of attorneys who specialized in elder law in the Portland area, handwritten notes about Oregon guardianship statutes, what they required, how they could be challenged, what a court would need to see, and a full page of bullet points about Vivian, dates, observations, things Dorothy had noticed and written down before she got too sick to keep going, questions Vivian had asked about the house value, a conversation Dorothy overheard between Carlton and Vivian about when Dad can't manage things anymore, that was dated 4 months before Dorothy died. And at the bottom of the envelope, a letter. 1 page. Her handwriting got smaller toward the end, which told me she wrote it late in her illness, when her hand tired fast. It said, "Russell, if you're reading this, it means what I was worried about is happening. I saw how Vivian looked at this house, at your accounts, at everything we built. I didn't want to scare you while I was still here because I didn't have proof. Just a feeling, but I know you. You'll see what I saw eventually, and you'll know what to do. Call Lorraine Caldwell. She's an attorney in the Pearl District. I already spoke with her about our situation. She's expecting your call whenever it comes. I love you. Don't let them take what's yours. Dorothy." I sat at that desk for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done since her funeral. I cried. Not a lot, but enough. Dorothy saw it coming. She saw it when she was dying and still had the presence of mind to build me a safety net from a hospital bed. That's who she was. That's who I lost. I wiped my face, picked up the phone, and called Lorraine Caldwell. She answered on the 3rd ring. When I said my name, there was a pause. Then she said, "I've been wondering when this call would come. How soon can you get to my office?" I said, "Tomorrow morning." That night, Carlton asked how the appointment at Crestview went. I said it was informative, that I'd think about their suggestions. Vivian asked if I wanted dinner. I said yes, thank you. I sat at the table and ate and made conversation and didn't let a single thing show on my face. 31 years of sitting across from people whose books didn't balance. You learn to keep your expression neutral. The next morning I called my best friend, Clifford Harmon. Clifford and I go back over 20 years, met at an accounting conference in Seattle, competed for the same clients, then decided we liked each other too much to stay rivals. He retired 3 years before me, spends his time sailing badly and reading well. I told him I needed him. He asked no questions, just said he'd meet me there. When I got to Lorraine's office, 2nd floor of a converted Victorian in the Pearl District, Clifford was already in the waiting room with his own travel mug and a look that said he'd cleared his whole day. That's what 20 years of friendship looks like. No questions, just presence. I spread everything on Lorraine's desk. Dorothy's envelope, the trust draft, the notes about Vivian, the letter, and the folded note from Nadine. I told her about the wealth firm, the papers they wanted me to sign, the consolidation of power of attorney they'd been pushing for. Lorraine read everything without interrupting. Took her about 15 minutes. Then she looked up and said, "Your wife was right to be concerned. What they're doing is a 2-step process. Step 1, get you to voluntarily transfer control of your assets through the wealth firm. If that fails, and it did because you walked out, step 2 is a guardianship application. They petition the court to declare you mentally incapable, and then they take control legally." I said, "What's my best move?" She said, "Sell the house before any petition is filed. You have every legal right to do that. Once a sale is completed and recorded, a later incapacity order has nothing to attach to. The property is gone, but we need documentation. I want 3 independent cognitive assessments done this month, all by specialists with no connection to your family doctor. And I want every decision you make from this point forward on paper." Clifford leaned forward. "Russell, you sure about this? Selling the house?" I thought about Dorothy's kitchen, the maple tree, the drawer pulls she replaced 3 times because she could never find the right ones. The handprints Carlton pressed into paint on the laundry room wall when he was 6 years old. I said it stopped being my house the day they started measuring it. Lorraine picked up the phone and called a realtor she trusted for quiet, fast transactions. His name was Nolan Perry. She told him what we needed: no public listing, no open houses, quick close, serious buyers only. Nolan called back before I left the office. He had a couple from Seattle already looking in the Hawthorne area. He thought they'd move fast. He was right. They made a full-price offer within 3 days. $780,000. Closing date, December 20th. The clock was running. The next 7 weeks ran on 2 tracks. On top, normal life. December in Portland. Vivian stringing lights on the mantle. Carlton dragging the Christmas tree through the front door. Grocery runs, wreath shopping, the usual holiday noise. I played my part. Smiled at dinner. Asked about Carlton's work. Complimented Vivian's cooking. Gave them absolutely nothing to suspect. Underneath, I was dismantling their plan piece by piece. First thing I did was open a new bank account at a branch across town. Statements going to a P.O. box on Burnside. No connection to anything Carlton or Vivian would know about. I transferred my emergency savings and set up the account to receive the house sale proceeds when the time came. Then I started carrying a voice recorder in my jacket pocket. Small thing, fit right next to my reading glasses. Clifford drove me to the electronics store for it on a Saturday morning. Oregon is a one-party consent state, which means as long as I'm part of the conversation, I can record it. Everything legal, everything documented. And I got my cognitive assessments done. 3 of them, all with independent specialists Lorraine's office arranged. No connection to my family doctor. No connection to Carlton or Vivian. The first one was on a Monday in early December, 2 hours in a clinic in Tigard. Memory tests, executive function, verbal reasoning, the whole range. Afterward, the specialist looked at me over her glasses and said my results were in the top quartile for my age group. No indication of cognitive decline. None. Second assessment, Thursday. Third one, the following Monday, all clean. Lorraine filed every report the same day they came in. 3 independent doctors, 3 clean results, all dated and documented. Meanwhile, I was listening. Wednesday evening that first week, I was reading in the living room. Carlton was in the kitchen on the phone. He didn't know I could hear him from where I sat, or maybe he just didn't care enough to check. He said, "January is the target. The family doctor already signed the letter. We just need Christmas to go smooth and then we file." No, he doesn't suspect anything. The old man is completely in the dark. I turned a page of my book, kept reading. The recorder in my jacket was running. That Friday, Vivian came into my study while I was at the desk. She said she was looking for the tape dispenser. I pointed to the kitchen. She stood there for a few seconds longer than she needed to, eyes moving across the papers on my desk. I had left nothing important out. She smiled and left. The next Tuesday, I came home to find both of them at the dining room table with papers spread out. They covered them fast when I walked in, but not before I saw the letterhead, a law firm I didn't recognize. I said I was just getting water, went to the kitchen, and called Lorraine from the pantry. She checked the court registry. No application filed yet. They were still preparing. She said, "They're close, Russell. Probably filing right after Christmas. You're still ahead of them?" I said, "Will the sale hold?" She said, "The sale closes December 20th. Anything they file after that has nothing to attach to." You're clear. December 20th came. Carlton and Vivian left for work at 8:30. I watched their car pull out of the driveway, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table for a while. 30 years in that kitchen. The window over the sink that looks out at the maple. The drawer pulls Dorothy replaced 3 times. The paint handprints from when Carlton was 6 that we kept through every renovation. Then I drove to Lorraine's office and signed the papers. The house on Hawthorne transferred to the Prescott family of Seattle. $780,000 minus fees, wired to my new account. Possession date, December 26th. I shook hands with the buyer's lawyer, thanked Lorraine, and stood outside on the sidewalk in the December cold. I felt the weight of it, not regret, something heavier. The understanding that some things can't be taken back, and that this was a consequence of choices my son made, not me. Knowing that didn't make it painless. I drove to a hotel on Stark Street. Clifford was waiting in the lobby with 2 sandwiches from the deli on Burnside and a thermos of coffee because he said hotel coffee was an insult to the profession. We sat by the window and ate without saying much. At one point, he put his hand on my shoulder. Didn't say a word. It was enough. On the morning of December 24th, I drove back to the house while Carlton and Vivian were out for last-minute shopping. I let myself in with my key still worked. Sale possession wasn't until the 26th. I went to the kitchen and placed an envelope in the drawer next to the stove. The one Vivian always opened for foil and plastic wrap. On the front, in my steadiest handwriting, "To my son, read this when you find it." Inside, a copy of the signed purchase agreement for the house, dated December 20th, notarized, and a letter 4 paragraphs I'd rewritten 6 times. It said I knew about Crestview. I knew about the guardianship plan, the family doctor's letter, the months of fabricated incidents they'd been documenting, that I had 3 independent cognitive assessments proving full capacity, that the house was sold, that they had until December 26th, that I wished them well and would not be at Christmas dinner. I sealed the envelope, photographed it and its contents, sent the photos to Lorraine and to Clifford. Then I locked the door behind me and drove back to the hotel. Christmas morning, I'd been awake since 5. Sat by the window watching Portland go gray and still under a thin frost, the harbor visible in the distance. At 9:17, my phone lit up. Carlton. I let it ring 4 times. Answered. His voice came through already cracking. Not angry, not yet. Just confused and scared in a way that after everything, still hit me somewhere I wasn't ready for. "Dad, where are you? I found this envelope. What is this?" "What did you do?" I said. "I did what I needed to do to protect myself. Read the full letter." Vivian's voice in the background, sharp, asking what was happening. Carlton said, "The house, Dad. You sold the house? How? We live here." I said, "You have until December 26th per the sale agreement. The new owners take possession that morning." Silence, a long one. Then his voice changed, hardened, the confusion turning into something uglier. "You can't do this. I'll call a lawyer." "You weren't in your right mind." "You've been," I said. "I have 3 independent cognitive assessments, all done this month, all confirming full mental capacity. I also have a voice recording of you on the phone telling someone, and I'm quoting you here, that the old man is completely in the dark." I paused. "Would you like me to play that for your attorney?" Nothing. Then very quietly, "You recorded me. One-party consent, legal in Oregon. Your lawyer will confirm that." More silence, Vivian saying something I couldn't make out, Carlton breathing. I said, "Merry Christmas, Carlton." I hung up. Set the phone on the nightstand, sat there for a minute looking at the frost on the window. Then I opened my phone, saved the call recording to the encrypted drive, same folder as the photographs, the assessments, the sale documents, Dorothy's letter. Everything clean, everything documented. 31 years of knowing that the foundation of any case isn't the argument. It's the paper trail. Clifford texted at 10. "How'd it go?" I wrote back, "As expected. He'll file something in January. We're ready." Clifford replied, "Breakfast tomorrow. That place on Hawthorne." Then a second text, "Proud of you. They filed in January. Guardianship petition plus an emergency injunction to reverse the sale. Their attorney, a man named Thornton, who specialized in estate disputes, moved fast. Lorraine moved faster. The injunction was denied within the week. Justice Elaine Whitfield reviewed the file and noted that the sale had been executed by an individual with 3 documented cognitive assessments, independent legal counsel, and a clear and rational motive. She used the phrase lawful self-protection in her ruling. The guardianship application dragged into February. Thornton brought in the family doctor, Dr. Brannigan, who had written the incapacity letter, on cross-examination. Lorraine took him apart in about 15 minutes. He had never administered a formal cognitive assessment. He had accepted a one-sided account of my behavior from Carlton and Vivian without verification. He had not reviewed any of the 3 independent assessments before signing his letter. By the time Lorraine was done, Dr. Brannigan looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. The application collapsed in March. Justice Whitfield dismissed it and referred Dr. Brannigan's conduct to the state medical board. She said, and I remember this clearly, that a guardianship petition is one of the most serious legal instruments in the state, and that filing one without genuine clinical foundation wasn't just careless. It was a misuse of a system built to protect people who actually need it. Lorraine filed my counterclaim the same week. 18 months of unpaid rent at market rate, $2,000 per month, $36,000, damages for emotional distress, and the cost of defending a fraudulent petition, $22,000. Total judgment, $58,000. Carlton's lawyer and Vivian's lawyer, she'd hired her own by then, spent 20 minutes in front of the judge, blaming each other. Carlton said Vivian pushed the plan. Vivian said Carlton initiated it. Justice Whitfield didn't look impressed by either of them. Judgment for the plaintiff. $58,000 plus court costs. Dr. Brannigan received a formal reprimand and mandatory ethics training. By June, Carlton had filed for bankruptcy. By August, he and Vivian had separated. He moved to a small apartment in Gresham. She went back to her parents' place in Salem. The $58,000 was mostly uncollectible. The trustee sent me a partial payment of $3,808 in hundreds and I heart 8 her 2,000 in Oregon 30,808 30 3 he each them n of if explaining that gesture was for me, not for them. I found a new place, a one-story in Lake Oswego. Small, south-facing backyard, no guest room, no extra space that wasn't mine on purpose. A Japanese maple in the front garden that the previous owner swore turned a remarkable color in October. Clifford helped me move on a Saturday, took 2 truckloads. He complained about his back on the second trip, then carried the heavier boxes anyway, which is exactly the kind of thing he does. The last thing I unpacked was a photograph of Dorothy, the one from Cannon Beach, the summer before she got sick, laughing at something off camera, her hand up to hold back her hair in the wind. I put it on the mantel in the front room where the afternoon light would find it. A few weeks after I settled in, I drove back to Crestview Wealth Partners, walked in. Nadine was at the front desk. She looked up, recognized me, and went still. I handed her a thank you card. Nothing fancy. I said, "You didn't have to do what you did that day, but I'm glad you did." She looked at the card for a moment. Then at me, she said, "I've watched families bring people in here before. Most of them just sign whatever's put in front of them." She paused. "I was hoping you'd be the one who didn't." I thanked her and left. In October, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Carlton, new phone," it said. "Dad, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I know what I did, and I know what it cost you. I'm sorry." I read it twice. Thought about the boy who ran downstairs at 5 a.m. on Christmas morning with his whole face lit up. Thought about the man on the phone in my kitchen, calling me the old man like I was already gone. I typed 3 words, "I know you are," sent it, blocked the number. Put the phone down and walked outside to look at the Japanese maple, which had turned exactly the color the previous owner promised. November now. Clifford came by with a bottle of decent scotch. We sat by the fire and talked about nothing important for 3 hours, which was a luxury I didn't fully appreciate until recently. He said, "Think he'll reach out again?" I said, "Probably. Eventually. What do you do?" I looked at the fire for a while. "I don't know yet. Right now I'm just living in a house that nobody's plotting to take from me. And that's enough." Clifford raised his glass. "To Dorothy." I raised mine. "To Dorothy." She knew. Even while she was dying, she knew. And she left me exactly what I needed, right where I'd find it, the moment I needed to look. The scotch was excellent. The house was warm. The maple would come back in spring. That was enough. I spent 31 years building other people's financial security with patience and paper trails. It took me 7 weeks to build my own, on nothing but truth, documentation, and a letter from a woman who loved me enough to protect me from the other side. An honest set of books will always outlast a fraudulent one. Dorothy taught me that, and she was right, even after she was gone. If this story reminded you of someone who deserves better, share it with them. And if you've been through something like this, tell your story in the comments. You'd be surprised how many people are fighting the same fight in silence. Now Russell got his ending, but not everyone does. In our next story, a retired teacher found out her own daughter had been forging her signature for 3 years. What she did about it made national news. Subscribe so you don't miss it.